The Worldwide Conservatorium of Music welcomes you to Lives of the Great Composers. Today, Beethoven, presented by Professor Percy B Scholes.
Hello. Beethoven was the greatest Dutch composer of all time. Now, many people think he was German, wrongly. He himself, when money was tight, asked for more support, as he was related to the nobility. Whereupon he was told in no uncertain term that he was not a von, but a van, which made him Flemish. And they probably threw in some lumpin joke about clog dancing for good measure. Why, today he could legally be able to play in the Netherlands national piano team in the Olympics. The confusion about his nationality arises because he was born in Bonn in 1770, which at the time was not a part of Holland. Beethoven was the worst thing to happen to the whole classical and romantic periods of music. Why, you ask? Or perhaps I'm hearing things again. Because he was a terrible little piggy. Would he let anyone else have some glory? No. He took over the musical scene so totally that one can only say his selfishness knew no bounds. No one could get a hearing when he was around. The Ninth Symphony. Someone else could have written that if he hadn't got in first and spoiled their chances. Weber and Schubert picked up some crumbs. Poor old Hoffmann and Hummel hardly had a chance. He frightened Brahms off the symphony until he was in his 40s. Beethoven has a lot to answer for. He was a good composer, don't get me wrong. However, if you hear any piece of music written between the years 1780 and 1826 that doesn't sound like Beethoven, it's bound to be him. It's his greatest weakness. Hear Mozart? You know it's Mozart. Hear Hindemith on the wireless? You can turn him off. But Beethoven? After Mozart, he was the first to make his living as a composer without being a servant of the nobility or church. So I suppose one can understand that, as the leading composer of the high classical period, that on that fateful morning in 1800, when he read in his newspaper that the new romantic period had begun, he decided to dominate that as well. Ludwig was a chronic overachiever and a warning to us all. My good friend Dr. Dean explains this manic overreaching on the fact that Beethoven wasn't getting any. Though it has never increased my output, I must admit. But we do know that he was single by choice, not his own. I, however, blame his lack of wife and unhappy love life on his total misunderstanding of women. Once he was madly in love, so he decided to dedicate a piece to her, choosing his Opus 27, number 2. Unfortunately explaining to her that it suggested to him the voices of the dead in a graveyard. His advances were declined. Fortunately, his publisher called it the Moonlight Sonata. musical historians are often perplexed and amazed that Beethoven lived in 71 various houses in and around Vienna. Obviously, none of these historians has shared a wall with a pianoforte and a deaf composer. Now, much has been made of his deafness, which of course led to his oft-repeated and most famous saying, "What?" You will be pleased to know, however, that there were two areas where he did not succeed. Personal hygiene. His breath was a weapon Napoleon could have used at Waterloo. And the other was opera. But even there he was his usual excessive self. His only opera, Fidelio, had only 3 performances, yet it has 4 overtures. The idea didn't catch on. However, never one to admit defeat. For the rest of his life he threatened to thrust another opera onto the stage. Not for the love of opera, of course, but as a warning to the good opera composers that he was planning to take over their area as well. His long-suffering fellow composers didn't take the competition entirely lying down. They had managed to get Salieri locked up in an asylum, and continually greeted each of Beethoven's new pieces with the cry that he had obviously gone mad. It didn't work. The public wouldn't buy it. He is often represented as a Napoleonic figure, and indeed his image has come to represent serious music. How many small children have been frightened off music forever by his scowling image glaring down at them from the top of their pianoforte? Well, would you want to meet him in a dark alley? In Vienna in 1827, at the age of 56, he died of cirrhosis of the liver, in spite of taking his doctor's advice by cutting back his wine intake to only 1 bottle per meal, which just goes to show that even in those days you couldn't trust doctors. But where would orchestras and entrepreneurs be without the Beethoven repertoire? No matter how often the pieces are played, audiences will turn up for him. Indeed, I have heard some of his work so often in my life that I now find them quite moving, like prunes. Even my dear friend, Dr. Dean, has recently been on tour performing the ever-popular Eroica Symphony in his own transcription for solo euphonium. Audiences, he tells me, were speechless, which is probably a good thing. I look forward to our next little ramble. Till then.
This week's featured books are How to Waltz to Richard Strauss and Renata Tebaldi, Was She? Order online and receive your free copy of our surprisingly successful DVD, Debbie Does Delius. You can find all these and more at the Worldwide Conservatorium of Music website. Just remember what all our students say about us. What a con. That's whatacon.com. This program produced by Gregory Gesh.